No, I look forward to seeing that. Maybe as we start wrapping up, talk to me about the race format, and you kind of compared it to some other sports, and you think there's going to be interesting pressures that come with it and strategy. Like the sport has, it's still one man down a hill, but the courses are clearly getting a bit shorter within reason for TV. These formats,
Yeah.
they tried a different format and now they're going to another different format, which I think is closer to the original and how it should be. But you've only got X number in the final, 30 or whatever they're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, speak to a little bit about that, those pressures and the performance
Well,
aspect and your
yeah,
thoughts on it.
I think it's great because I see that if you're a protected rider, then that pressure element is reduced, like we talked about earlier. So the psychology is changed for that person. Whereas
Yeah, it's
now
not a
it's
level
all on,
playing field. Yeah.
yeah. So everyone has that same pressure, that same on each of the stages to be able to perform at their highest level or not make it. And that's the way it should be, because you can have that peace of mind if you've protected that then gives you an advantage. So it's when you get
Yeah,
into that,
yeah.
that's how we've seen in the past those guys at the top might not be floating at the top as much because they're brought down on the psychological level to having to perform each time, each race, and that puts on it that level playing field, which I think is a good move. It's less complicated for a viewer as well. And I don't know, maybe initially they thought that the top performing riders being protected will get more views. The people that follow more of the individual athletes. The way I see it also is that there's been a bit of a shift in maybe the way that they frame it. Keep hearing about F1 and teams. So maybe riders can float about, but ultimately it's about the team. And that's maybe how these factory teams, there might be a little bit of numbing down of individual personalities, which I've seen before. And it's all about like, how is the team doing? I don't know how that dynamic's going to change much about the sport or how it's viewed and received by people online and whoever's watching. But ultimately I think there's a bigger investment then for teams to be putting in a more professional approach, because ultimately their name is higher on the visibility level versus individual riders and people that, love a rider versus, a culture of a team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This is probably of the first time I'm speaking about it in 2025. We haven't done our review podcast or preview podcast and broken down the riders at all, or these changes. I've kind of just stayed out of it because, like you mentioned, depends what I can control is what I'm going to fight for, right? And I'm a spokesperson for the sport. I just want the best for the riders and the sport. So I think we've all got an opinion. It's tough to hide behind it, and biasly, I'm all for the new format because technically I mentioned LCQ a year or two before that. And I'm not claiming I'm the only person that thought of it. I'm just saying, like, I already spotted that there was not an even playing field if they are going to decrease the number in the final, which is not up to me. But if you're going to do that, I think there was a more level playing field and fairer way to do that. And that would be this LCQ or Q1, Q2. So all for that. I think that's a better way to do it. And that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, you've just mentioned an interesting thing. Like, what is the reason? They're clearly wanting to decrease the amount of people in the pits and teams because they can't get to certain venues. So I can understand, like, what's the red tape? You can't just shit on a decision without going, why did it come about? And everyone's going to have a different way of going about it. So yeah, they seemingly are pushing the teams forward, and that
Yeah, no, I see
simplifies it
some,
for them. But maybe there's other reasons, like you say, okay, if the teams start becoming established and we know they're there for 3 years when they earn that way, maybe the swear word in the room of outside industry sponsorship actually happens. I don't know.
yeah,
I have no idea. I thought it would have, we've been talking about it for 20 years. Let's hope it comes back. And maybe that gives the team an opportunity. I'm trying to be devil's advocate and open-minded as I start talking about these topics. And I do see where it's like with the point structure, and now the riders being sort of rewarded for how well they did, and a person like Danny Hart being sought after because he's got points, and because he's Danny Hart, right? But I do think it's still an individual sport.
Yes,
Ronan has a
agreed.
terrible time, and there's no points. He's still Ronan Dunn. Are you going to bet on him or not? So if you're a team and you can't get the points, or you've kept points from someone else, I still think the proof's in the pudding. You still become a rider that can win a race or not.
And part of getting a team, there was a caveat in there about social media presence. If you have a team of super high influencers, regardless of results, then you might get an entry versus a high performing team that has like no one of note, let's say, that people don't really know. So there's a balance that I think that they're trying to find to get the most out of visibility, and I guess developing into this team-based structure versus individuals, where maybe a team can run one rider one weekend and a different rider another weekend, collect the points, but not necessarily have the individuals fighting for like the overall. Do you know what I mean? Like, who's the overall individual versus who's the overall team? And I think they're going to try and push that team up, like the Constructors' Championship kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
That could be something they're doing. I don't know how that works, because we tune in for the individual. If Loic goes to a different team, then I know of the team. Like, it's not football. It's not Chelsea. I'm not a Chelsea fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Loic Bruni fan. He won the race. Like, Chelsea has a striker who I don't know who it is, and he scores a lot of goals. You can become his fan, and you move to where he goes. He goes to Barcelona. You probably start watching Barcelona matches.
A little bit, but then your blood is Chelsea, isn't it? So
but your blood is Chelsea. We don't historically have that. So is that an attempt?
Blood
to change
is downhill.
Culture? I don't know.
We just want downhill to be. Our blood is downhill.
We want downhill. We want fair racing, and we want entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got to see it play out, right? Like I mentioned, the riders mentioned they didn't like semifinals before it happened, and we tested it. And what's cool is they've adapted. Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah.
We tried something new.
Ultimately,
like, you've got to start trying things as well to try increase visibility.
We are where we are, and it's just been difficult when Red Bull came off, then visibility goes down, and we can't reflect too much on that and be like, oh, it's so shit, because it's like leaving that behind.
Yeah.
The difficulty now comes in how many people are actually seeing to make it attractive to sponsor. Like, why would Porsche sponsor a downhill team versus a soapbox racer on Red Bull that probably gets more views of a weekend than a World Cup? Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's put Porsche on a fucking plywood buggy to go down and smash into some hay bales. Like, when we're talking about eyes on, then ultimately they get more visibility there. But what does it mean to be a named sponsor of a team? And this is because the change was happening, and this is what I wanted for YT. Sorry, I didn't say YT before then, but the YT team was to be a step ahead of it. So that then sponsors can look at a team that is making change, making big impact in an industry of performance. And that means a lot for people like Wahoo. Wahoo are going to sponsor a team that are making big changes, making waves in the way that things are done. Not differently for different sake, but bringing it up to a level of other sports is not unusual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then it's like, what does that team, how does that align with a sponsor, I guess? And having a more professional approach versus what a lot of outside the industry people will see as an extreme sport full of beer drinking, crazy people. It's then reframing it into, oh, this is an actual sport with athletes who are training all of their lives. They don't party hard anymore. They really look after their sleep. They're high level athletes and would perform well in any other sport. That's the kind of sponsorship that it opens more doors by reframing it that way.